today I would like to just share with you some of my thoughts. We all know that avatars and all our gurus were avatars. They come on this earth for some specific reason, for some specific purpose and mission in their lives. Same way Paramahansa Yogananda, our great guru, he also came on this earth for a specific mission. And we all know that. And it was the task of his guru, Sri Yukteswarji, to train him for this purpose. When Sri Yukteswarji met Babaji during Kumbh Mela, Babaji told him that he will be sending him a disciple to whom he has to train and send to West. And when in Sri Rampur, Paramahansa Yogananda met for the first time Sri Yukteswarji, so Sri Yukteswarji insisted that he should take a university degree, because he told him that if you go to West, they won't take it kindly if you are not having university degree. So, it means his task was cut out. But I was wondering, so I'm just recollecting in my mind, the role played by Lahiri Mahasaya in the life of Paramahansa Yogananda to accomplish his mission. And I was just going through the autobiography of Yogi and other scriptures and writings, and it dawned upon me that much before his birth, much before the birth of Paramahansa Yogananda, Lahiri Mahasaya had started working on him. Initially, Babaji met Christ in Himalayas, then Babaji managed or arranged to get Lahiri Mahasaya to Himalayas and gave him initiation. And much before the birth of Paramahansa Yogananda, his parents, they were religious, but they were not that inclined towards religion, that his father actually took his work above his religion. And one of his subordinates requested him to give him leave to go to Lahiri Mahasaya and meet him. He refused. The same day evening, when they were walking towards the home, both of them, Avinash and Bhagwati, his father, so Lahiri Mahasaya manifested himself in front of them and rather admonished his father that why he was not giving him leave to come to him. And then he vanished. Yogananda, his father, not only granted him leave, but also went along with him to Banaras with his wife. There they took initiation into Kriya Yoga from Lahiri Mahasaya and got blessings. And before and after the birth of Yogananda, Mukanda, they met Lahiri Mahasaya, and Mukanda's mother was blessed by Lahiri Mahasaya. And after his birth, she took him when he was just a few months old to Lahiri Mahasaya. And that time he told his mother that, young mother, your son will become an engine and will lead many souls towards salvation. So that was his blessings. And from very childhood, if you see, Lahiri Mahasaya was guiding him. When Yogananda ji got Asiatic cholera and he has given up, that he won't survive, that time his mother told him to just pray to Lahiri Mahasaya and it will be alright. So lying down, he prayed to Lahiri Mahasaya and immediately he was cured. And we know that in his, we have read autobiography of a yogi, that he used to go to many saints and religious persons. And to great surprise, most of them were disciples of Lahiri Mahasaya. So it is not a coincidence, because nothing happens in this world is coincidence. It is all well planned. Most of them were disciples of Lahiri Mahasaya, who gave him encouragement and taught him. And when his father arranged for a Sanskrit teacher for Paramahansa Yogananda, and unknowingly you didn't know that he also was the disciple of Paramahansa Lahiri Mahasaya. So that was the greatness. So Lahiri Mahasaya was, from the very beginning, he was guiding him. He was, his task was cut out, and for his mission in life, which he accomplished later on in the West. So that's all we wanted to share. There are many other things also, small incidences which we can discuss later on. But
through this book, Affirmations by Swamiji. And the first affirmation here is on success. Now, I feel I'm a classic example here. You'll know in a little while. So, I've had a regular childhood. I grew up, went to college, and I passed out. I did a regular job. Then I got married. Then the children came along, and I decided to be a full-time mother because I thought that was my highest duty. So that one went on for a while, and as the kids grew up, I had a lot of time on hand after that. They were independent, so I am kind of by nature a karma yogi, cannot sit still for long. So I decided to do something. I'm good at picking up ideas and working on those. I also like to achieve things. So I used to pick up an idea, make it into a venture, try to have some monetary gains from it, and would feel nice about it. This would go on for a year, and the next, and the next. Finally, some restlessness would set in. Though it all looked good, it all looked very successful from outside, inside there was a restlessness. I felt empty. So I would give it up. Then I would sit still for a while, till a new idea would pop up again. Then I would pick it up and repeat the same thing again. So, idea after idea, venture after venture, this went on. My family was growing fed up of me. They said, if I went to them and I told them I have this new idea in mind and I'm going to try it out, they said, you're going to give it up soon. I used to be offended, but still I went ahead and I did those things. And one fine day, I had this book in my hand, autobiography, and thank God for that. Otherwise, you would have seen my book, seen my name in the Guinness book for a record number of ventures. I would have gone on and on had I not got this book in my hand. So he actually saved me. I started taking the classes, I meditated and went to satsangs, I did seva, and my cup started filling up little by little. The emptiness started going away. I was surprised myself what was happening. After a good meditation, I would feel successful, like I never did, whatever I tried in my life. And this little act of mine, just 30 minutes, gave me that feeling of success. So, I was wondering, what is true success? If this feels so successful, what I was doing all that time? Why was I wasting my time? So, I came across this book and I read Swamiji's words, and I just read it out to you because I completely agreed to what he was trying to say here. He talks about success. True success means transcendence. It means finding what we really want, which is not outward things, but inner peace of mind, self-understanding, and above all, the joy of God. Outward success means transcendence also. It means rising above past accomplishments to reach new levels of achievements. Success can mean accepting failure too, when such acceptance helps us to transcend a false ambition. Every failure, moreover, can be a stepping stone to high achievement. Success should not be measured by the things accomplished, but by our increasing understanding, ability, and closeness to God. So today, when I have an old-timer meeting me up and asking me, so what are you up to nowadays? I just fold my hands and say, nothing, I have retired. Thank you.
Today I'd like to share some thoughts on the subject of what does it mean to be centered in body, mind, and spirit. Tripti's little story was a good jumping off point. When we grow up, we don't necessarily have a sense of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And even though in Indian culture, the thought of God and communion with spirit is a part of that culture, in the West, there are many, people are religious and they practice high teachings. Well, they follow high teachings that they don't necessarily practice. But the opportunity for understanding how it is that we can find fulfillment in life isn't apparent to us much of the time. In the standard educational system, they emphasize reading, writing, and arithmetic, not how to be happy, how to be centered, and what value that might have in your life. I remember a story, an incident about Swami Kriyananda. When he was a young man, he grew up in Europe, and if you grow up in Europe, it's possible that you would become a skier in the Alps somewhere. And he went to some school where they would ski right from the school itself. So he skied at a young age. And when I first came to Ananda in the early 70s, every once in a while, he didn't do it often, but a few times he would go skiing. And he had problems with his hip, which got worse and worse, which didn't really allow him to enjoy skiing probably as much as he would have if his body had cooperated. But on one of these trips, a group of people were in the car with him, and they're driving up into the mountains, and of course there's snow everywhere, and the roads were quite icy. I don't know who was driving, but at some point, the people in front of them a bus stopped, and they were behind. They tried to stop, and they went sliding right into the bus, and smashed their car. Didn't hurt the bus. Did something to the car, they couldn't continue. So the natural reaction that most of us, I think, would have, well, skiing is done for the day. Well, you know, we'll have to figure out what to do with the car and how to get home. But Kriyanandaji, he wasn't like that at all. He said, okay, well, let's get on the bus. They all got on the bus and got dropped off at the proper exit. They all went skiing. I have no idea how they got home. I wasn't there on that particular trip. But Swamiji told the story about how when he was on the bus, somebody had asked him, well, you don't seem very upset. You just wrecked your car. Your car is, you know, gone. You should be upset. And he said, well, you know, in a week or in a month, I would feel fine. So why not start right now? And this idea that there's a place inside of us that we can live that is not so reactive to the ups and downs of life, but that place is not a place of shutting off. It's not a place where we go and hide in the corner and say, oh, it didn't happen, it didn't happen. It's not a place where we suppress how we really feel. You know, oh yes, I feel fine, and then as soon as nobody's looking, ah! No, it's not like that at all. It's a genuine positive space that is a dynamic experience. It's not just what you might say passive equilibrium. It's a dynamic state of well-being. I remember, just because we're on the subject of skiing, Swamiji, another trip I went with him, and I could ski in the most basic way. But Swamiji had this classic, you know, European ski style, where you held your feet very close together, and then you just sort of wiggled your knees, and the rest of you, you know, was just completely in balance. And the thing is, he didn't just sort of, you know, slowly. He was like, whoosh. He really had no trouble going fast, and he looked like he was just absolutely relaxed and smooth. He's just having a great time, and I'm going, and this, he later in many classes that I attended, he talked about skiing, and he talked about he had seen many beginner skiers and how they tended to overreact and they tended to lean this way or lean that way. And he said he tried this with a person who he noticed, someone who he'd never met before, but he noticed they were having a little trouble on their first day skiing. So he made a suggestion. He says, just visualize your center. Visualize the middle of your body and be there. Don't be out here in your arms. Be in your center. And sometime later, he saw that person again. He says, oh, how are you doing? And they said, oh, wow, thank you so much for that suggestion. And our center is a place that we're not as familiar with it as we are with the heart. We all know the heart. We know that it's not just a pumping station, but that it's a place where we experience emotional response, and most importantly, our inner connection to spirit and universal consciousness. This center, this place inside of ourselves, which is our center, has a deep spiritual basis. Yoganandaji said that spirit is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And that the place that we experience that center is a point of intuitive perception in the heart. So that point of intuitive perception is our personal access point to universal consciousness. That is our true center. And when we connect to any aspect of center, no matter, in the beginning, center is out here. We are taught to live through our senses. So it's our legs and our arms and our ears, our eyes. These are where we live. But we can never find a real balance if we always live out here. We have to get to our center, and then from that center, you can do a wide variety of things in life. As one of the interesting things about the educational system at Ananda, my children, I have a son and a daughter who are adults, and they grew up at Ananda, and the classes at Ananda are much more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic, although they do those things. But they give the children an experience which allows them to explore their sense of self, their sense of discovery about what's going on in there, and then the application, the experimentation with what they discover, giving them opportunities to explore what we would describe as self-development, but what yogis would describe as a higher self-development rather than a lower self-development. When we talk about egotistical people, we would sometimes describe them as self-centered. Yes? Well, he's a very self-centered. He only thinks of himself. But that's the lower ego self-centered. But this is where most people live. Their center is their ego. Their center is their likes and dislikes. If they don't get what they like, they get off-center. If they get what they like, then they're feeling pretty good. And they would describe that relative happiness as the totality of our potential for happiness. But yogis would talk about the higher self-center. I remember when my daughter was in school and she had a little trouble during the day. In the afternoon, she'd get a little moody. So that's common. So her teacher said, observe this, and didn't criticize her for it, but asked her, how do you feel about that? She says, just the way it is. She says, well, would you like to try something to shift it, to see if it could be something else? Oh, okay. So he said, okay, here's what you do. When you start to feel that, observe that you're starting to feel that dip, and then go, I am awake, energetic, enthusiastic. I'm awake, energetic, enthusiastic. And of course, the first couple of times she did it, she thought it was kind of silly. But her teacher observed sometime later that she did make a practice of doing it. And I observed one afternoon when she was at home, she was in her room going, I'm awake, energetic, enthusiastic. And I'm going, yeah, now this is the right kind of school. Because she learned, one, to observe how she was feeling, and then she had something to do about it. And when we talk about being centered in life, we first have to learn what center is. Not center of the ego, but the center of the spirit. And because we've all met people who are, self-confident, nothing seems to bother them. And the thing is that you can get that way, but it can only be in the mind. I would say a lot of motivational speakers have a sense of that confidence, and they're always talking about being positive and all this stuff. But and some well-known spiritual speakers are talk about this sort of thing. But I remember, I'm being careful how I say this. A friend of mine worked for a publisher who had many well-known authors on spiritual subjects, and so he got to meet many of these authors, and some of these authors were like really well known, and his observation about them was, having met them, spent time with them, knowing them personally, not just their public persona, he said, I wouldn't want to be friends with very many of them. It's really easy to look good on the outside. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean that what they're saying is wrong. It means that they haven't fully digested what they're saying. And of course, aren't we all in that circumstance till we're free? Until we're free, we haven't fully digested what it is that we've been learning about our potential. So I really don't mean that critically against them. I observe it as something that we should understand about our potential. It's not just enough to get the idea, oh, of course, this is the way it's supposed to be. We have to take it into ourselves and digest it and then live it. And in order to live our center, we have to spend some time there. If we want to experience our potential for equilibrium, let's say, yes, of course, samadhi, conscious oneness is the goal. But let's say we don't make that. We could still make some substantial progress. Most importantly, whatever we're capable of accomplishing, we should try to accomplish it. You really never know if you try to climb Mount Everest, you don't really know if you're going to make it. But you don't want to start at the bottom and say, well, no biggie, doesn't matter. You got to try with, I'm going to do my very best to make it. If you don't, what's the point? So then you say, well, how is it that we can get to our center, at least that we can get there and begin to explore it? And this is one of the most powerful early benefits of meditation. People don't realize that meditation isn't just for what you're going to accomplish over your lifetime, but in a very short period of time through the practice of meditation, you should feel a connection to your center. It's not vague, you're not feeling all of your center, you're not feeling the universe of your center, but you're feeling that space. It's like a cave. So if you look at the front of a cave, you can only see it from the front. We look at our center, we only can see a certain amount. If you really want to know the cave, you got to go in it. And meditation, you might say, is going into the cave of our inner being. And in the beginning, though, as soon as you see the cave, oh, I know it's there. And then you get to the front of it, you're going, oh, I haven't gone in the depths, but now I realize that there really is a cave here, because I'm starting to enter into it. And this is the key in meditation, is to realize that we don't need to worry about how far we're going to get. What we need to do is give our full attention to where we are right here and right now. And you will begin to feel this sense of inner well-being. Yeah, a little bit of peacefulness. In the beginning, it's just the escaping from all the problems and restless thoughts. But over time, it's an actual dynamic experience of well-being. And that potential just gets bigger and bigger. Kriyanandaji described it towards the end of his life, that sometimes that well-being was so dynamic that he could hardly handle it. He said it was just, overwhelming at times. That's not samadhi, but it sure sounds good. That's not your everyday sense of well-being. But that is living in your center. Well, when you get one of those candies, it has a little creamy center inside. You got to get through the hard covering. The hard covering is the ego, but the creamy center is God's bliss. This is our center. And to the extent that we connect to that center, we can work at it from both sides. In other words, we're really looking from the outside in. But in order to penetrate, you have to begin to feel from the inside out. But the first thing we have to do is still the body. And of course, this is what we practice. Energization exercise is helpful for that. Hatha yoga is helpful for that. Learning how to sit still. And then we do an exercise where we kind of sit it straight, but then we lean left and right or slightly front and back. We begin to visualize you might say a hollow tube going up and down the center of the body. And then you begin to imagine that the tube doesn't move, that pole doesn't move, and so you begin to feel the edges of it. You begin to feel, and this is the inner spine. It's just inside the physical spine, in the very center of the body. And if you begin to feel that, and you begin to open yourself up to perceiving it, and then in meditation, you become calmer and calmer. You, as Yoganandaji described, you withdraw the sense telephones, like the tortoise. You pull in your arms and your head, and you go within, so you're no longer paying attention to sense stimulus, and you're opening yourself up to your inner center of intuitive perception. And in that space, we begin to feel, initially we feel peace and calmness. And at some point we feel joy, bliss. And other stuff can happen too, but we won't discuss that today. So when we learn to connect to our center, we'll find that it has application physically, as in skiing or any dance. Even walking down the street, you have to be in balance, because the streets are quite, have unexpected obstacles all over the place. And also, you have to kind of dance through the traffic sometimes. Could be in your car, but it could be walking. You have to be light on your feet. You have to be aware. This is something that a lot of people don't do. They tend to get in a close focus. So they're only aware of their little space. And they tend not to reach out and realize what's going on around them. And I encourage you to practice this expanded awareness. Don't just see the stuff in front of you. And of course, a good chess player doesn't just do the move that they're doing. They do, 3, 4, 5, 7 steps ahead. You begin to see a larger playing field in life. You begin to experience a broader, more expanded view. And you recognize that you can stay in balance with this larger perspective more easily than if you get too close and get too caught up in your own little space. So the ramifications for this are endless. But I remember some years ago, I lived I was living next to the village in America, not on the property, but in a home just down the street. And there was a neighbor who was not a devotee, and they had cherry trees. And so the son of the owner would never have done this, but the son, the owner had gone on vacation or something, and the son was there, and he was determined to keep the birds off the cherries. So his system for doing that was to have a gun, a little rifle, but it was a pellet rifle. Not real bullets, but little bullets. And so he's standing outside of his house with his little rifle, shooting at birds. And one of them he hits, and it lands on our side of the fence. So I was not really too enthusiastic about shooting birds to save a few cherries. I didn't think that that was really, the best way to approach the situation. But of course, I couldn't tell him what to do. But I could tell him not to drop his dead birds on our property. So I went over to the bird, and he came out. And I said, come on, you don't really need to do this. Of course, I'm just standing there, and he's standing there with a gun. And it didn't occur to me until after we'd gotten into the conversation, and I had basically, told him that what he was doing wasn't, this is just not right. And he called me, he tried to think of the worst thing that he could say to me. And normally that would have been swearing of some kind. But he looked at me, he got all shaky, went, oh, you do-gooder. Which to me was just, that almost made me laugh, which probably would have gotten me into trouble. But to claim that I was a do-gooder to him was just a terrible thought. He was, oh, that's nice of you to say, thank you. But right after that I realized, this guy's holding a gun. People shoot other people, you never know what for, And in that moment I had this thought, I said, oh, I should be concerned. But I wasn't. And I appreciated that. I appreciated that my automatic reaction to this guy having a gun and that he was, basically against me, it didn't bother me. And I see that as one of the fruits of meditation. I see that as this sense that your well-being is never going, was my well-being upset by the fact that he shot the bird and it died? Not really. I didn't like it. I wasn't going to act like it didn't happen, and I wasn't going to not say something. But I didn't start crying or yelling. I didn't go out and get it, if I had a gun, I didn't jump over the fence and start beating him with a stick and yelling at him. I just said, look, this isn't nice. And I did it in a normal, conversational voice. And this sense of responding to life with a sense of equilibrium is one of the great benefits of meditation. And recognizing this conscious process of inner well-being, inner connection. And we've seen this over the years in the village with the kids who have grown up there and gone to our school system, is that they, as a result of being in this atmosphere where everybody is living consciously in their own attempts to be connected to their center, that they, regardless of whether they think they're doing it or not, they are doing it. It's their culture. And some of them did it more consciously than others at different times. But through consciously helping them to observe and develop themselves as thinkers and expressors, and people who, being aware of how you care about others, not just yourself, and how you relate to life on both an individual scale and a larger scale. And we've seen that so many of the students have grown up into people who become natural leaders, who in any case have a sense of personal well-being, a personal center that many people don't have. And I've discussed this with my children every once in a while over the years, and they look back and they recognize what a unique experience they had, and they're very thankful for it. And this is a natural consequence. When we talk about yoga being scientific, this is a natural consequence of the practice of meditation and the other aspects of spiritual practice that we follow. This sense of centered well-being, and that it's not imaginary. It's not something that you're just trying to make up. Yet while we use affirmation, the experience is not an affirmation. If you want to be a great bicycle rider, then affirm being a great bicycle rider, but don't think that affirming it makes you it. You have to do the actions. You have to follow through. Well, I should correct myself a little bit. That affirmation can mean that you are it on the inside, but you still have to manifest it on the outside. Make that affirmation strong. Make it true. But you have to make it true through following through. That's why we say, Swamiji, when he talks about truth, he talks about if he said he was going to go to the store in the afternoon, that even if something came up and he didn't need to go, he would still go. Because he wanted, if he said it, it had to be true. He had to do everything that he could to make his words true. And by doing that, then at some point the universe, as Patanjali says, everything you say will become true. But this is part of that growing process. So the center that we touch in meditation helps us to have mental equilibrium. In the example I used, it was my neighbor with a gun. But it can be at work. It can be in relationships, even family relationships that are challenging. Everybody knows an overbearing somebody, and how do you stand up with equilibrium when relatives are, standing against you for whatever reason? And people face this, in the when you go shopping and you have to negotiate for the price or some problem that's occurred. Do we do these things from our center? And what we begin to do is once we feel that center, we begin to reflect that center. So that doesn't mean you can't be strong. And many people think that by becoming a devotee, you become weak. No. One of the aspects of God is the power of the universe, and that becomes part of your responsibility to use that power and to use it wisely with the right consciousness. But that's what Jesus said. If he had faith, he could move mountains. You begin to access a great power. Swamiji experienced a time quite early in his sadhana where he felt like he could accomplish anything. But Dayamata guided him. She said, well, don't let it make you ruthless. Because they say that all power corrupts. And you really have to be careful. We often seek things and we don't realize what kind of trouble we can get into if we get them. So this is why we can share our preferences with God, but then we say, thy will be done. So when we talk about center, we're talking about a very real place that we can explore through quieting the mind, through going inside. And then as you go deeper and deeper, you begin to discover and allow, because you have begun to practice yama and niyama, because you have taken more and more conscious of control of your life, God will give you more power to accomplish. And when we practice energization, we're practicing how to consciously draw on that power. And it's a natural process, but it's a conscious process. It's something that we have to do with our eyes open. And in this case, with our minds open, with our hearts open. So when we talk about being centered, we have to remember that it reaches into body, mind, spirit, and emotions as well. We connect mind and emotions because the feelings of the emotions are not the same as the feelings of spirit. The emotions have the ups and downs. The emotions get us into trouble. Even strong positive emotions can get you into trouble. Usually we think that negative emotions, but positive emotions can lead us to become overbalanced in the direction of our desires, and the automatic emotional response to that is a letdown, is a depression. So if we get really excited, we got our jewelry, and so we finally saved up or whatever, we got their jewelry, we take it home, we have it, we look at it, oh, I have my jewelry. And then about an hour or a day later, it's like, no, now I'm not so excited anymore. This is one of the great tricks of Maya. So if you look at the lives of the jet setters, they have money, they do anything they want. They fly to France for dinner, they fly all night and end up in the, in the Caribbean or whatever, somewhere, and for breakfast, do whatever they want. And half the time they're bored. What do they do when they get bored? They drink alcohol and take drugs. They could be serving humanity and cultivating, and I am, of course, generalizing. But the point is that it's our sense of well-being is in our center. And when we live from that center, we will, to whatever extent our karma will allow us, we will experience physical well-being, mental well-being, emotional well-being, and spiritual well-being. So I encourage you to practice this conscious process of living in your center. Pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to your reaction to life and what you're feeling about what's going on around you. And then use that information in harmony with your intuitive connection to spirit in order to make decisions about how to live it in the best possible way, which will lead to true happiness. And not only happiness for yourself, but happiness for everyone that you